Article 18 deals with layoff and recall. As public employees, you have certain rights in terms of seniority for your job, and this is where seniority really comes into play at work. Article 18 applies to non-civil service employees for the most part. If you hold a permanent certification title in civil service, which is rare these days, but if you are a civil service employee, you have additional rights through the civil service law, which Richard may get into briefly. Seniority, however, is defined as service rendered in your department or agency. Now, this is, a lot of people get confused by this. If you started off in agency A and worked for a couple of years, and then moved to agency B for more years, your seniority in that agency B is only in that agency B. It's not your state service date. So seniority is an important thing to be clear of. Seniority lists are pulled together by the agencies, by the various agencies, at the point of reductions in force. And it is the policy of this Local 282 of NAGE, that the seniority, if folks are looking for their status on the civil service, on the seniority list, that they should go to their human resource person at the agency or personnel officer and ask to see the seniority list and check their seniority date to make sure that it is accurate. At the point of a reduction in force, the union is notified, or should be notified, 10 days in advance. Notice to employees are sent 5 working days in advance in most cases, almost all cases. At the point of a reduction in force, with that 10-day notice to the union president, a meeting is set up to go over the plan for the reduction in force. And the seniority lists are generated and provided to the union president so that that can be monitored, and the agency will properly be conducting any layoffs that they are planning. There is a specific displacement or bumping procedure. Displacement is a term that's used for lateral displacement. Bumping is downwards. And the actual procedures are very complex because there's a bumping chain that occurs, and the list literally changes as people are removed from that list. So it's not possible to give a clear prediction of how things will proceed. They can be tracked in process, and in general, the agencies are fairly good at keeping track of the bumping chain, and this is monitored closely by your union president. Also under Article 18, transfer options are listed, and NAGE is special in having a recall roster which is statewide. So if a person should be laid off, reduced in force, laid off, you, as an NAGE member, you will have statewide recall to your position. So that means not only recall to your agency, but any state agency across the Commonwealth. And with our some improved language in the contract this time around, we've been able to limit the extent of sending out notices. For example, keeping those notices of recall more localized, so you have an option at that point of choosing to what location in the state you would be able to receive a recall to. Again, stewards are advised to contact their union president to discuss these matters. Whenever a layoff is noticed to everyone, people get very, very upset. It is a very confusing and anxiety-provoking time, There's no easy way through this. It's something that we try to resist at all cost, but whenever there's no work or no money, it is entirely legal for the Commonwealth, for the agencies, to lay people off. Let me turn things over to David Young.
Okay, Greg once again has pretty well covered this particular article. I'll just point out a few things from my perspective as to how layoffs work. When I worked for the Department of Mental Health, I closed Northampton Hospital, Met State Hospital, Gabers Children's Center, Danvers State Hospital, Solomon Mental Health Center, and downsized and contracted out other facilities and programs. The basic principle of layoffs is the least senior employee will be laid off. But when layoffs take place, they take place by work unit, program, facility, or account. The reduction will affect more senior people in the initial phase of the layoff. But then by a complicated scheme of reassignment and bumping down, you eventually get to the least senior employee, who is the one who will be laid off. In fact, when Met State Hospital closed, the Commissioner of Mental Health was bragging about the fact of the 100 employees at Met State, only 3 of them applied for unemployment insurance. So our outplacement efforts must have been really good. She didn't talk about the 197 more senior employees who bumped out 197 less senior employees, and they collected unemployment insurance. This is what Greg has referred to as the bumping chain, and it goes on for quite some time. So this is a long process, as I said. Management will endeavor at the beginning to limit the impact of layoffs because of this complicated process. This may include early retirement, voluntary layoffs with incentive, retirements with incentives, and reassignment from a position targeted for reduction to a position not targeted for reduction. Management and the union will agree on geographic areas or regions in which reassignment and bumping will take place. Employees will be considered to be in the geographic region where they actually work, regardless of what account they are in. For example, if you're in a central office program funded by a central office account, but you're assigned to a regional office, your layoff and bumping rights will be determined by your location at that regional office, not central office. Likewise, your layoff rights are determined by the title you are in, even if you're performing duties not appropriate to that title. There's no such thing as changing titles during the midst of a layoff. Everything is more or less frozen in place. If you receive a layoff notice, check your title, check your geographic assignment, check your seniority date, check your civil service status, and check your hours of work, full-time or part-time. If there are any errors, please contact management and the union immediately, as those errors can affect your range of reassignment and bumping rights. As to recall, you are not applying for the position. Some managers, when an employee is recalled, try to go through an interview or application process. You have a right to recall to your title. This is a right, it's not an application for a job. And you should also be given a reasonable period of time for training or orientation to the new job and the new job duties if that's necessary. You should not be treated differently than any other employee who has your seniority.
Well, thank you, David. Richard?
Okay, just a couple of things I'd like to add here. One thing is, as Greg indicated in his remarks, if you have civil service status, and you probably don't because it's become quite a rare situation to have civil service status in the state executive branch these days. It does apply mostly to public safety employees. But if you do have civil service status, you have rights under the civil service law, and I would urge you to check those out too. if you get involved in a layoff situation yourself. There has been an important change in the current contract with regard to bumping. In the older contracts, what happened is if you were targeted for layoff and you wanted to bump another employee out, the Commonwealth could insist that you had to be able to perform the duties of the less senior employee immediately. That could be somewhat unrealistic because some of the titles are quite broad and people in the same title might actually do very different things. But now the contract has changed so that you have to be able to show that you have the education experience so that you could perform the duties of the job you're trying to bump into with 90 days, with up to 90 days of training. That's a very important difference. So keep that in mind if you should wind up in the unfortunate situation of getting a layoff notice and needing to invoke your bumping rights. The other important issue to keep in mind is that of geographic area of recall. You can't select the geographic area to which you would accept recall. That's very important because Massachusetts is a kind of a long state, and you don't want to wind up in the situation of working in Boston and all of a sudden be giving a recall notice to a job in Springfield that just is not likely to be very practical for you. So again, if you receive a recall notice, check out your rights to select the geographic area to which you could accept recall so you don't wind up in the position of getting a recall notice to a job that's just too far away. That's it.
Thank you, Richard. David. Layoffs and bumping affect people very deeply. It's a time of great stress and anxiety. And my experience with working with many people who have gone through the layoff process is that they are severely stressed. And in some cases, it's, I think, traumatizing to them. So my best advice is for stewards to take their time with individuals, help the individuals literally to breathe and step back a little bit and think about things as much as they possibly can. But it's a crisis, and it's a tough thing for people to go through. And we've done everything possible to try to mitigate that stress through our contractual changes and embellishments to the contract that we have in place. But again, these things can happen and periodically, and we don't look forward to those.
If I could just follow up on that for a moment, Greg. When I deliver layoff notices to employees, they sometimes hesitate to invoke their bumping rights because they don't want to displace somebody. I always advise the employee, this is your right under the contract. You have a right to reassignment and bumping. If you want to take a reassignment or to bump down, that's your right under the contract. Don't hesitate to invoke your right, even though you may be displacing another employee.
Thank you, David.